Hello and welcome to Ensuring Success 2019. We're so glad you're here with us today. For those of you who've been with us all day, thank you for sticking it out all day. We're so excited about this. 10 hours, there are only 2 hours left to go. I think, 2, 3? 3. We're getting there. 3 hours left to go. It's been a great day so far, and I hope you all have enjoyed the sessions you've attended. For those of you just joining us, welcome. We're so glad that you're here. Before we go any further, I'll just tell you I'm Gail Perry, Editor-in-Chief of CPA Practice Advisor Magazine, and I would like to take a moment to thank our sponsors who have made this event possible for all of us. And so they are Paychex, CPA.com, ADP, Xero, Chase Inc., Wolters Kluwer, Intuit, Gusto, Canopy, Avalara, Sage, BQE Core, and eFileForBiz.com. So thank you to all of them. Thank you also, and a shout out to Isaac O'Bannon, our managing editor, who is behind the scenes doing social media for this event. Also, for those of you just joining this session, if this is your first session, just a brief description of how CPE works for this event. We will display 3 codes during the event. They'll appear on the bottom of the screen. I will call attention to them to make sure that you look up and see them. And you need to record those codes. At the end of the event, you'll have 3 different codes, and that will be your verification for attending this event, this session. So at the end of the day, when you've watched all the sessions you want to watch, you'll click on the CPE tab at the top of your screen, and it will open a new form where you can enter all the CPE codes you've collected for the day, and that's how you'll get your CPE for this event. You can reach us at any time if you have questions at info@ensuringsuccess.com, and if you're on social media, we'd love to have you share information about us. Our social media hashtag is DecemberCPE, so please tweet about us and get the word out, because there's still 3 sessions left, so there's plenty of time for people to still join in and be part of this amazing event. So in this session, we're going to talk about how you can be a better accounting advisor by looking at future trends. We're going to discuss how future trends will impact the profession. So we have 3 people here who know quite a bit about what's happening in the profession and where we think it's going to go. I will introduce them briefly to you and then let them tell you a little bit about themselves. So we have David Cleslak, we have Shehan Chandrasekera, and Aaron Berson. So please tell me a little bit about yourselves.
So David Cleslak, RKL eSolutions. I'm the Chief Cloud Officer. And many people know me as Inspector Gadget because
Yes.
I spend a lot of my time just kind of trying to understand the latest technology and how it can help us work better, smarter.
My name is Shehan, and I'm the head of tax strategy at CoinTracker. So my background is a CPA, but for the past couple of years, I have specifically been focusing on the cryptocurrency, blockchain-related trends, and the taxation, and those type of compliance issues.
My name is Aaron Berson. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Fringe Accounting Co. We're a boutique accounting firm and advisory firm focusing on CAS, outsourced controller CFO services for really any size business, mainly focused on more complex businesses, as well as business intelligence and I'd say business reimagination for our clients.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. So we're going to be talking about a lot of trends in this session and what's happening in the profession, but I wanted to start with this one. Partly because it's very fresh. If you have not seen the finalized version of Schedule 1 for the IRS 1040 next year, you may not have seen this line that's been added, but I will read it to you. At any time during 2019, did you receive, sell, send, exchange, or otherwise acquire any financial interest in any virtual currency? That's pretty remarkably all-encompassing. It's almost like, did you look at virtual currency, which you can't quite see, but online, did you look at it? So the IRS very much wants to know who's messing with virtual currency. There was an IRS quote I read recently that says, cryptocurrencies are undermining the financial and the tax system. So they're not looking on cryptocurrencies very kindly. So not only do they want to know all about it, they want to, well, we're not sure what they want to do with it, but we're going to ask Shehan because he's been looking into this quite a bit. So let's start with that.
Yeah, like Gail said, that question is pretty broad. I mean, it's pretty much asking, have you even remotely touched cryptocurrency in any way? It's a yes and no question, similar to the foreign financial account question that you see on the Schedule B. So a little bit of background about that question. So there was a session done by the IRS Chief Counsel, Michael Desmond. So he said that the service should be receiving roughly 8 million returns with some type of crypto affiliation, but right now they're receiving far fewer than that. So they're adding this question to increase the voluntary compliance and kind of alerting the taxpayers that, IRS is, they're looking into this space, more than ever before. In addition to that, actually, let me tell you one more thing about Schedule 1. So a few months ago, it was in draft form, and today I got the news that it's finalized. Mm-hmm. So you will see that in the next coming tax season. And what's interesting is that, a couple of years ago, the cryptocurrency was like somewhat of a niche practice area for accountants, but going forward, this is going to become more mainstream because you're going to have to ask this question from your client. This question is going to be included in your organizer. If your client says yes, you had to figure out, how to calculate the gains and losses because there are some technical things that are not similar to stock transactions that you just had to kind of know enough to calculate the gains and losses and report correctly on the returns.
So what's your gut feeling when you see this statement that says cryptocurrencies are undermining the financial and the tax system? Is the feeling that by answering that question yes, mm-hmm. on the new question on Schedule 1, is that going to open tax returns up to audit or just like put your name in some database for future reference? Or
I have a feeling when you say yes, it's going to be included in some type of database. For example, let's say you keep checking yes for the 5 years and you don't have any gains or losses, it's highly unlikely that you're reporting everything right. I mean, yeah, in some scenario you could be like a very, very, long-term, cryptocurrency holder, but that's highly unlikely in this space. And then going back to the code that you mentioned, especially, the clientele you're going to find in the cryptocurrency space, they're somewhat against these taxation or like centralized agencies because this whole, blockchain technology and cryptocurrency is based on this whole premise of decentralization. So it's peer-to-peer. Why am I paying something to the government, So that's part of the reason why the compliance rates is so low. But, IRS is doing their best because, they're working with a limited budget, very old school, one of the few organizations that still use fax machines. So imagine them going from using fax machines to auditing cryptocurrency. There's a big gap. So, yeah.
Okay.
I thought it was just doctors' offices still using fax machines. So thank you for that.
Yeah, they do, yeah. And so, in general, and any of you can answer this, but what if accountants want to learn more because they're obviously going to have to ask their tax clients this question now, and there'll probably be a discussion because their tax clients are probably going to want to know why that's on the form. If accountants want to learn more about cryptocurrency in general, and maybe even specifically about taxation of exchanges of cryptocurrency, where do they go? What do they do? How do they do that?
I would tell you that CPA.com, AICPA, is really trying to take a leadership role in this, and so they've got a lot of really good assets, a lot of good training materials. So, and I think it familiarizes practitioners with blockchain at a high level, from conceptually, all the way down to some of the specifics that any practitioner is going to need to know based upon the focus area within their practice. So I think there's some terrific resources out there. You can Google that, but it's interesting that the quote about undermining just kind of overall, systems. And I'm thinking, well, I can appreciate that it's really impairing visibility. So, when all of our funds are traveling through, basically a formalized banking system, visibility is not a challenge. But once you kind of pull that out of that formalized environment, yes, I think that's really more to the point. Is they're worried about we don't know what we don't know and losing visibility to that. So asking the practitioners to basically make sure they're asking the question and checking the right boxes when returns are prepared and so forth. But to me, crypto is just one piece of that. But anyone who's doing tax prep is on the front lines.
Yeah, I mean, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say to that point about getting educated on all these technologies, I would say don't go immediately to like AICPA or something like that, because that's a more narrowed view of it, right? Because that's the accounting view on that technology. So my personal belief is get a broader understanding of what that technology looks like and how it functions and how it works from really an agnostic, industry agnostic, application agnostic view, so that you have a good base knowledge, and then go apply that more narrowed view from whether it's the accounting space or if you're in the crypto space, right? Because all this also is, underpinned by blockchain as the technology that's enabling crypto and everything like that. So understanding a little bit about blockchain and then how that feeds into crypto and everything, I think really would help the practitioners and really anyone looking to understand it more. A much different view of it than kind of the interpretation of only a select few. You know what I mean? So I think that's, in my opinion, where you should start.
Yeah, I think the tech industry is moving pretty fast, and tax code is I think 70 or 80,000 pages. So you don't have to be an expert, but as long as you build a skill to identify the issues, and then you can go figure it out we have so many resources, CPEs like he mentioned, and Google, but just be better at issue identification. So that applies to everywhere, not even crypto, like anything.
Yeah.
So
that applies to really anything with what we're going to talk about here today with new technology, is just being able to understand how any of that could work, how it applies, and kind of what that could be, could make possible, I should say. So kind of that education or research skill, I think, is what would be really important in this space.
Excellent. All right, and I just want to mention, I love how, I think it was 2 years ago at this event, we asked the audience a question of who's heard of blockchain, and people, we used the term blockchain, and people were writing in saying, what is that, what are you talking about? That was just 2 years ago. I think the terms are becoming, the terms related to cryptocurrency are becoming pretty mainstream now, even if people still don't have an education in the area, they at least know it's here and it's,
They've heard
making an impact.
Yeah.
So let's jump over to a little bit of information about big data and analytics. And we talked a little bit about analytics in terms of audits in the last session. So what are we seeing in terms of big data? What does that mean, and how is it impacting accountants and their clients?
Well, I'll go ahead and start with that, and I'll just say big data is big and getting bigger. And by that I mean, we're just collecting so much information, both personally as well as within the context of, the organizations we work in, and really looking to say, how can we, take that now and leverage it, do something with it, help bring about better decision making. And so what we are telling, our clients, and I love the phrase you used right at the outset, you said that you're helping your clients reimagine business.
Yep.
To me, that's so much of what we're trying to do as well. It's not about re-engineering or tweaking something. It's about reimagining what a future is going to look like with some of these technologies in place. And big data really is the foundation for all of that. So we've got all this information we're collecting, and now we look at that and say, what here is potentially actionable, what's potentially going to help me make better strategic decisions. So it's about visibility into the data. It's about using tools to understand what's there, to alert us, to ultimately, hopefully, guide us. So, and rather than being compliance oriented and really kind of, descriptive in our mindset, how can we use the data to become more predictive, what might happen, or even prescriptive. What should I do based upon what I'm seeing here? And that's the opportunity behind it. And kind of the last piece I'll add too is that really the cloud is helping kind of bring all of this about. We've got this data. It's not just living in local data stores, local data warehouses. A lot of it is now in cloud-based applications, and now living kind of shoulder to shoulder with broader data sets, other data lakes that are out there. And so there's all sorts of insights that it's going to potentially make available to us if that's something we're subscribed into.
Yeah, go ahead.
So, like, if you take like a mid-sized accounting firms, like you have access to all the tax returns. Like tax returns pretty much tell the entire story about their lifestyle. How much charitable contributions that you do every year, your medical expenses and everything. So there are these tools that analyze all your clientele, and pretty much like David mentioned, it kind of gives you insight. Okay, this client could use this tax planning tool and to save this much of money. So I think with us collecting all the data, like every second, even when you think that your phone is standby, it's sending something to Google or somewhere in the cloud. So we are getting so much of this data. I think pretty much in the near future, we're gonna get to a point where that we have so much data that we can pretty much predict the future, because we can analyze the patterns, and that applies to accounting and tax industries as well. So there's a lot to think about, I guess.
What's the fear of data being manipulated?
I would tell you that I think it's, if there's anything that kind of probably keeps me up at night, it's, what are providers, doing with this data? Are they securing it? I mean, almost a day doesn't go by when we, when we're not hearing of some kind of data breach. And, a lot of that very sensitive. And if it were just login names and passwords, I think I'd feel, at least I have a shot at this. But I mean, some of it's, very, potentially very sensitive, very extensive. I mean, I even think of things like, these, Ancestry.com or 23andMe, those kinds of, and what are the controls that, organizations are putting in and around that? So it's one thing to say we're collecting vast amounts of information, a lot of it very sensitive, very personal, not anything I would willingly want to expose. And if it's going to organizations and they're not really doing, just what's required, what's necessary to properly protect that, it really brings about, a real uneasy feeling. Again, if you talk, what keeps me up at night, it's thinking, man, this stuff is, it's kind of a loaded gun, and in the hands of somebody else, I'm pretty concerned about it.
Yeah, I think that's also what's making the attractiveness of blockchain come about so much more, is because it's that theory that it's, unchangeable in essence, where once it's there, no one can manipulate it like they can in an internal storage or something to that degree. So I think that's what's kind of fueling that, because of those fears, because I think every person who's alive probably shares those fears, or some degree of them. I also think there's a generational acceptance of certain things there as well. But I think that's what's driving that attractiveness towards that, and then towards crypto, and that transparency, but yet security of that entire technology base. So I think that's kind of what's starting to combine all of these different things together.
Yeah, I mean, speaking of privacy, we cannot forget Facebook, right? I mean, everybody knows what they're going through. But let me tie Facebook's story into Libra. For those of you who don't know, Facebook had this idea of coming up with their own cryptocurrency called Libra. If they were successful, they would be the biggest bank of the world. So that means they know everything we like to eat, all of our friends, everything we buy, and they would also know all our financial habits. So imagine having all that data in one source, especially Facebook hasn't had the best reputation lately when it comes to security and privacy. Again, just wanted to share that story. So going back to the story, one more thing. Facebook is still in the discussion with the Congress and various other, the policymakers and regulators, because they're getting, the Congress, they don't want Facebook to have all that data because of the bad reputation they have had lately. Mm-hmm. But the blockchain could be a solution, but we are still in the infancy stage. Yeah.
Interesting. Okay. Another trend that we see coming down the horizon that's, I think, still presenting a lot of more questions than answers is the concept of working with robotic processes, robotic process automation. What is that? How is that? What is it, and how do we expect it might impact us in our profession to begin with?
To me, RPA, I'll start, and then I know you got lots to share on this too.
No
so
problem.
thanks, Aaron. So robotic process automation I think of as kind of the on-ramp to AI, and so artificial intelligence, and kind of bringing the machine to bear against that data we were just talking about to give us insights. And so, the best way to think about robotic process automation is just taking low-value, high-effort tasks, bringing automation to that. And doing something to kind of, ultimately, kind of eliminate keystrokes. And if that sounds a lot like a macro, then that's not a mystery or not a surprise. That's really kind of what it is. And so, but it's product agnostic. We're able to kind of take some of these tools, put them in place, automate process across multiple applications, but really kind of think of that as just, kind of record and playback. That's the best way to think of RPA. And so we're not really kind of relying heavily on the machine other than for that kind of playback process. But there's all sorts of processes within any firm that might benefit from RPA. So I look at that and I say, why wouldn't we do that as at least one kind of first and very preliminary form of automation? I think it's an opportunity for many organizations right now.
Yeah, I think you're 100% right on that point, right? So it's the gateway drug, basically, to AI automation and everything else. Yeah, I know, right? So, I mean, that's really where it all begins. I mean, I remember I was doing that type of work before I even knew what RPA was, because I wanted to get as much work done without doing any work, because why not?
I knew I'd like
right?
to.
Yeah, I know, right? I mean, the less I could work, but the more I could produce, the better I could achieve other things, right? So that's where I started automating very early on, just tax extensions, where you have these zero-do extensions. You just have to click like 30 boxes in a tax program to generate an extension, which is the worst use of anyone's time. Trained, untrained, skilled, or not skilled, it's just a waste of time. So then basically RPA is recording and having those mouse clicks and keyboard strokes across any single program that's out there, which I think for accounting firms, that's really powerful, because that's where you have all these disparate legacy systems that exist in these different firms, whether it be things that talk to one another, don't talk to one another, or they're homegrown that they built in their IT department over the last 35 years. They can't automate those because they were never built with that intention, because they weren't built by a skilled programmer or someone who had that thought process. Especially 25 years ago, they weren't even thinking about this stuff. So that layer allows basically that automation of all of those tedious, manual tasks across everything. And the nice thing about it is you could actually carry data between the different systems. It's not just clicks and keyboard strokes. You can actually take that data, put it into a database, and then manipulate it, put it somewhere else, and actually make a very complex chain of actions. And then you could even run that in virtual machines now, so you don't even have to tie up a physical machine in your office, which is huge when you think about the cost of you have someone that's replaced by not needing them to do it, and then you still occupy their machine. They're just sitting having a coffee break. That's not the best use of their time still, but So I think that's kind of the gateway to all of this, and then you now start having RPA that's marrying with AI and getting smarter. Right? I almost think of RPA as the dumb automation technology, and then you have AI and machine learning as the intelligent side of it. But now when you start combining those, which some platforms have really started doing. Microsoft just released something last week, their UI automation flows, which is basically RPA cloud-based but locally deployed, which is extremely powerful because you have all those connectors to everything that's cloud-based, all that data that you talked about before, David, that you can now leverage both locally and in the cloud, which is, I think, really, really interesting when you start playing around with it.
And there's some great tools out there, and it's super easy to find them and to learn them. A lot of it is, as we kind of just said, it's record and playback, at least to get you started.
Yeah, initially,
and then from there you dig in a little more. Then most of these tools are pretty rich in giving you an opportunity to really, automate. Again, that high effort, low value. And I always think of it as kind of like a water line that keeps coming up. Why are we hiring folks to really do that when in fact we have an opportunity to work smarter, better, more, and really kind of reduce errors and, work much more efficiently leveraging these tools.
Yeah, and actually the funny thing you just said, reduce errors, right? Because everyone starts using some form of like form processing, OCR technology as part of that RPA piece, and then they start saying, oh, it has so many errors, it's doing all this. But on average, those are 60 to like 80% accurate. When you compare that to some humans that you hire, that's still far above some humans that you hire, especially early on in their training and in their careers. So, if someone's 80% efficient consistently, that's a lot better than someone who has a good day, a bad day, and goes up and down, and you get comfortable with them so you don't check their work and then they now make a mistake, So I think it actually raises that bar to reduce those errors significantly, even though there still are errors. It's not perfect, no technology is, but I think that's where you're able to then start focusing on error exception handling versus actually looking at every transaction or reviewing everything that a staff would do, right? So I also liken it to the computer is replacing your staff, right? So now you have your staff move up the value chain where they review the computer, and you now start teaching them these different skill sets that they need to learn. I know you were talking about that earlier, kind of those success skills, and you can free up their time to start doing those types of things. So then you could actually start creating advisors and not transactional processing teams.
Yeah, and I know for us, our recommendation is just start. Just do something. Yeah. Let's stop talking about it. Let's download a program. Let's experiment. Let's just at least understand what it is, but start. Do something.
And where would you start? What are some sample things that you would do in this area?
Well, I mean, Aaron just gave one example of an extension. I'm going, that's a perfect application because again, identified how long it took and said, wow, this just isn't great use of my time. And so just using one use case and saying, well, okay, that was valuable. That really kind of made a difference. It gave me X number of hours back. It allowed me to get it out the door in one day, what normally took 2, 3, 4 days. But and what we always say is, what are your biggest challenges? Where does it hurt the most? And look at that and say, even a portion of that, would that benefit from some level of that automation, to reduce that repetitive, kind of task-oriented, approach, and start there. And if nothing, so I always think, how do you eat an elephant? It's one bite at a time, So you basically say, let's just do this piece by piece, but start maybe where it's most time-intensive, where it hurts the most, but just start.
Yeah, and I think along those lines of just start talking to your team and I always started with, what do you hate to do? Because that's usually the thing that is very manual, very intensive, and very low value added, which technology is ripe to replace.
And they're almost always happy to share that with you too, right?
Oh yeah. Whether you ask it or not, they're probably already telling it to you. But actually formalizing that and actually having a brainstorming session with your team basically and saying what would be useful to you if we automated, because that usually then trickles down and translates into some extra value for the client, because either they're able to pay more attention to the client because they're not spending all that time clicking boxes. I mean, that tax extension example, it took on average 30 minutes to do a tax extension when that was for one state and the federal. That was it. 30 minutes with clicking all these boxes, reviewing and everything, and that went down to about 30 to 60 seconds, and without it being manned. And at that point, you just made an Excel list of all the names of clients that you wanted to do extensions, and then Sunday night you could just run it, and then you walk in the next morning with everything done.
All over, weren't you?
Oh, I was.
I'm all done.
Well, it was great because I got to walk around the office drinking my coffee, and everyone would make fun of me saying you're not working. I'm like, go look at my computer, it's working. It was great.
Yes, I'm kicking your tail.
All right, so we're going to take a quick break right here, and we have a commercial message from one of our sponsors, Canopy, which is going to be a brief message, and then when we get back, we'll show you your first CPE code for this session. So please don't go away.
The use of practice management and the workflow automation, it's like the Babe Ruth of platforms. Canopy has allowed me through practice management to bring all of my resources into one place and create my business startup processes in a workflow, my tax management in a workflow, to where I know what I'm supposed to do, and my junior associate is supposed to do every step of the way.
The CRM aspect of Canopy really provides us great insight to clients because it gives us one area to see who a client is, what products they have with us.
The practice management piece of Canopy really helps us perfect the sales pipeline and the onboarding process because we're able to use task workflows and engagement structures that are built into the system, custom built by us as administrators. It allows me to get a really good full picture of who that client is, where they've been with us, and where they're trying to go.
Hi, and welcome back. We are displaying the first CPE code for this session on the bottom of your screen, so please write that down and keep it handy, and we'll give you 2 more codes before we wrap up here. So another trend that we're looking at that is impacting the profession, and even though it's definitely got legs, it's still really in the getting started stage, I think, and that is client accounting services. And Aaron was talking about the fact that he's been doing that in his firm. A lot of firms are moving into that area. In the last session, if you were there, we were talking about the potential conflict with firms that do audits and want to also use some of their staff to do client accounting services, and that's an interesting issue in itself. But basically, let's talk a little bit about what client accounting services is, what's encompassed in that, and why this is suddenly a trend. This is like, it's accounting. We've been doing this forever, right? But now it's a trend. What's going on?
Yeah, so I mean, client accounting services, it covers a very broad spectrum, right? So it could be everything from process reengineering, reimagination, consulting, but at the core, what typically you see it being is more of that outsourced controller and CFO type service. So actually taking over the full back office for a company, so where they don't even need any financial people in-house, and you do everything from the payroll, transaction processing, payables, receivables, the reconciliations, budgeting, forecasting, dealing with investors, banks. It goes on, but it really is what level and to what degree are you actually doing that work. Right, so when you start getting into budgeting, dealing with the bankers and investors, that's more on the CFO side, and forecasting and those types of things. Then you have your controller services, which is more that day-to-day management of the data flow and kind of the function of accounting within the organization. And then you have what is traditionally bookkeeping, which is now transaction processing, but that's quickly becoming automated, right? So I actually want people to stop talking about bookkeeping because it's not what we do anymore. Mm-hmm. Even when you're quote unquote bookkeeping, you're using the technology, it's all integrating with one another, and you're really not even doing bookkeeping anymore. You're more managing connections between softwares and data flows and making sure that everything is not broken so that it all gets to where it needs to go. So I think we need to kind of all just stop talking about that and just accept that is table stakes. That's what everyone is doing, mm-hmm. and start talking about true controller and CFO services and mm-hmm. and actually do those services. I see a lot of people doing that type of work, or saying they're doing that type of work, but they're not. They're more doing modified bookkeeping still. So mm-hmm. I think we need to, we're making progress as a profession of getting higher up in that value chain, but I think we really need to focus on that because that's what the clients really want. And to your point about why is this becoming a trend, because it's a new service offering that, like you said, we've been doing for years. We just haven't been charging for it. Mm-hmm. We do it at year end.
Accountants are so good at that.
Oh, we do it all the time.
And feel guilty about it too.
Duh. Right? But yeah, that's the biggest thing. We've been doing it forever. We know how to do it. It's accounting. It's in the core of what we do. If a client doesn't have books, we do it at the end of the year as a big catch-up project to do the tax return because we have to have that compliance piece, or for a comp review or audit, whatever it is. But I think the big difference in client accounting services compared to that is actually doing it on a regular basis to be able to provide insights and actionable information and data to clients so that they can make smarter decisions in real time or near real time. I mean, we close a client's books within 24 to 48 hours after the end of the month if we need to. You know, that's real-time data, not 30 to 45 days after the month end or year end or whatever have you. So, I mean, that level of data awareness and kind of what's going on in your business allows owners to make smarter, more informed decisions. And then you start leveraging, you know, business intelligence and all these other different tools that are out there today. Now you can be actually showing insights and raising up real strategic examples of what a company should be doing versus what they've been doing, right? That managing by the bank balance or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
So,
I think you did a really nice job of just even kind of describing, you know, just the whole change that's going on within the profession. You think about it, you know, whether you call it client accounting services or business process outsourcing, whatever you call it, you know, accountants are, you know, quickly moving away from transactional and, you know, really just kind of, you know, the bookkeeping
Right.
or even compliance, and saying, I need to have a much more value-added, you know, relationship with my client, and it needs to be much more real time.
Yeah.
I mean, it can't be, you know, once a quarter, you know, or even monthly, but definitely not once a year. And if we're not doing that as practitioners, then our clients are going to look elsewhere for that, because they want to have a more strategic relationship with their practitioner and say, look, help me. You know, you know the numbers. You're pretty good. You're a pretty insightful, you know, smart individual. Help me understand what I'm looking at and what that, you know, might be, you know, what might be useful here in terms of decision making and guidance. And so, again, I look at CAS and I say, you know, fantastic. It's all part of, though, that greater story of becoming more consultative, more value add, less transactional, you know, less bean counting, candidly, and really, you know, become a more
advisor.
An advisor and strategic asset for our clients.
Yeah. And I'd say also doing that type of work, knowing that the data is clean, right? So garbage in, garbage out, right? But if we're actually managing that and knowing that everything is clean, then at year end we can actually automate a lot of the compliance work too. I mean, we could have the system actually automatically generate a tax return that just needs to be reviewed at a top level because all the data input has already been there and it's all coded and taken care of.
You're taking more time off again, aren't you?
Yeah.
I'd like to say.
Remember, work as little as possible and produce as much as possible.
I love the theme. Do you have that up on the wall?
I should. I should, right?
All right, we're going to do another quick break. We have another message from one of our sponsors. This time it is BQE Core, and when we come back, you'll have your second CPE code.
Engaging with a large number of clients on various levels comes with an abundance of administrative tasks. These were really diverting me away from engaging with my clients and helping them. With BQE Core, I can see who's working on what. And with the dashboards, I know exactly what's happening in real time. I'm able to easily manage everything, from reviewing time and expenses to receiving and approving invoices. Core has allowed us to simplify our many moving parts, resulting in a real gain in efficiency and ultimately allowing me to focus on bringing in new business. It's reassuring to know that our clients also use Core now. Sometimes it's all about setting a great example and allowing the numbers to speak for themselves.
And welcome back. The second CPE code for this session is now appearing on the bottom of your screen, so please take a moment to write that down. Keep it handy with the first code, and there's going to be one more in just a few minutes, and that will be your 3 codes for this session. So we're talking about trends that are impacting the future of accounting. Trends that we know are here, they're just kind of getting their legs and definitely going to be with us for a long time and making a difference in the way things are going in the future. So we've thrown the term AI around a couple times here in the last few descriptions of different trends. AI is artificial intelligence. What do we know about AI that's going to make a difference in our lives?
So I would tell you, to me, AI in so many respects, I mean, we already talked about RPA as the gateway drug. I love that metaphor for AI. But artificial intelligence, machine learning, ultimately deep learning is applying, the computer to that, that body of data, that information. We are all living in an AI world already. And so if you use Waze to navigate, to and from the office each day, you have any kind of, kind of smart speaker at home or in the office to turn on the lights or set the alarm, whatnot. I mean, these are all examples of AI within products. And now we're saying, what role does AI have within the applications, the process and the data within our practices? And I think it's just, it is an evolution, as you just said, Gail, but what we're going to see is that's going to bring about, basically a continuous audit or continuously, basically books that are always, ready to be reported on. So that's part of that real-time data. I don't want to do that, 5, 10, 15 days after each month end. I want to have that in the moment. I want to know that that's good, clean data, and I can act and react based upon what I'm looking at. So, in a lot of AI, people often say, well, how do I get started with AI, and how should I bring that into my practice? Interestingly enough, I think a lot of AI is going to show up within the products that we're working with. So if we've got cloud-based solutions that we've got that we've deployed, and many of the publishers are saying, let's put an AI layer on top of that to kind of go ahead and start helping the practitioner to leverage that data. So I think you gave an example of tax returns and insights that we might get from the tax data across our client base or doing people's books. But now again, AI is going to help us understand that body of data, bring insights into that, but it really is going to be the publishers, doing much of that. So I'm not sure there's a lot of heavy lift on the part of the practitioner to go out and do AI as a service and bring that in and do a lot of heavy work around that. A lot of that is going to start showing up within the solutions that we already subscribe to. The one thing I will add, though, too, is if you've got a lot of older legacy on-prem products, AI is not going to be an option. You really want to move to these cloud-based products because that's where the AI layer is being introduced by the publishers.
But that's a problem, right? I still see majority of the small to mid-sized accounting firms, they still have server rooms. So how can you implement AI and big data while having a server room, right? So that's the challenge that I'm seeing.
Just lock the door.
And move to the cloud. But still, we are in 2019 as an accounting industry. We're still thinking about this. Okay, let's move to the cloud. But the cloud is old technology. Yeah. Like, why are we still talking about this? So I feel like we are so behind as an industry. Yeah.
I think that's because people still haven't adopted it yet, right? Like you just said, there's firms that are decent-sized firms. I mean, top 200 firms still have server rooms, right? They still have that on-premise room that, I mean, from disaster recovery all the way down through leveraging AI and everything, it's horrible, right? I mean, when you really think about it. So I think that's why we're still talking about the cloud, because the whole industry hasn't actually bought into it. But I mean, even just the cloud, though, it's almost just virtual server rooms. I mean, when you think about it, it's just another server room that someone else is managing, a lot more power and security behind it. So I agree with you to some degree. I mean, that's also something that we need to stop talking about and just accept that everything should be there, and just if it's not, kind of let's keep going, right? That kind of thing.
Okay, what about trends in terms of smartphones? Where are they going? And apps, that we all use so many apps. And I mean, is this an interim device? What's next?
Oh, goodness, interim device. Wow. I don't think you could surgically remove that from most of the people I know.
I would say that, except what makes me say that is that those of us who've had these for a long time still call them phones. When you look at a list of like the top 20 things people do with these, phone isn't even on the list. So we can still call them phones, or smartphones, or however we want to refer to them, but they're probably not going to be thought of as that for a whole lot longer.
So that's a smart mobile device. That is not a phone, and I would agree with you absolutely on that one. I think the big trend that's going to happen in and around smart mobile, in the next year to 18 to 24 months is the arrival of 5G as the new, kind of high-speed, low-latency communication standard. So that's going to be dramatic, and not just because we're going to be able to do, faster inquiries, from our smart mobile devices, but it's going to enable some neat new use cases. And one of the ones I I'd like to talk about is truly autonomous driving. And so today, when you think about all the wonderful things in our cars, lane assist and, adaptive cruise and all well and good, but if we really want to move toward that, autonomous, we can't just leave it up to the vehicle to kind of figure it out on its own. And with 5G, we're going to start to have now input from the environment being transmitted into these smart vehicles. And that becomes the rest of the data that vehicle is going to need to properly navigate, move around, and so forth. Because at the end of the day, we live in not just a highly connected, it's a perpetually connected world. I just actually got back from a trip overseas, and I was trying to navigate through a small town, and I realized I had 3G signal, and it wasn't enough to even hook me to any kind of nav. And I'm going, oh my gosh, what do I do? And I'm going, talk about having, I forgot how to use paper maps. Right. So it is. 5G is going to be significant, and it's even to the point where it's potentially going to change, Internet of Things. We're going to be able to connect any and all devices through this new 5G standard, because it's, high speed, low latency, more connections. Each access point will support more connectivity, and all said and done, it's even going to be faster than our hardwired broadband connection in most of our homes and offices. So it's going to really dramatically kind of upend the whole connectivity, our mindset, our thinking around connectivity.
Speaking of phones, here's the way I would summarize this. So 2010, I had a phone that had a camera. 2019, I have a camera that has a phone.
Yeah, very good.
Yeah, I think I've heard people joke around that Apple's not a phone company; they're actually a camera company, right? Because that's really what they're focusing on and what they're making. But I think that's also to that point, right? These are not phones or anything; they're data pads or mobile smart devices or whatever you want to call them. I can't wait until we don't actually have to carry something around, and it's just whether it's our watch or something, or you see all the movies of like the implanted things or something like that, and the fears of it, but then the benefits of it, it's that kind of thing. But I think as more and more generations grow up where this is an integrated part of their lives, that becomes a less and less scary thing, right? I mean, even from 50 years ago to now, I mean, what we have in this one device couldn't fit in an entire room the size of where we are today, and now it's on our wrist.
Exactly. Yeah. So we're going to wrap this up in a minute, but first we have one more quick message from one of our sponsors, ADP, and we'll be back in just a moment with your last CPE code and some final thoughts.
I'm working to keep the fire going for another 150 years.
To inspire confidence through style.
I'm working to make connections of a different kind.
I'm working for beauty that begins with nature.
To treat every car like I treat mine.
At ADP, we're designing a better way to work so you can achieve what you're working for.
And we are back. So please write down the code that you see on the bottom of your screen. This is your third CPE code for this session. So when you're done for the day, you'll go to the CPE tab at the top of the screen and enter the CPE codes for all of the sessions you've attended, and that's how you'll get your credit. We've been talking about trends, a lot of them having to do with technology during this session, and I just wanted to mention there's a gentleman whose title is futurist named Daniel Burrus. If you've been around the profession, you may have heard about him for a while because he's been working with the accounting profession for several years, who published a report recently, and it was called the Top 20 Technology-Driven Hard Trends Shaping 2018 and Beyond. So this was last year's report. Most of the things, actually all the things we talked about were on this list, and along with a few other things. But the point was that he referred to these as hard trends. And his definition of a hard trend is something that's going to happen whether you like it or not. So these aren't anything that we can go backwards from. There are things out there that we might try and they might not work, but these are all things that are happening to us and going to continue to improve and get faster and better. And there are plenty more, but this is what we covered in this session. I really want to thank our panelists for sharing their insights, because all these guys are very immersed in hard trends, and we'll likely be back next year with a list of new ones too. So thank you so much. Thank all of you for being with us this session. Don't go away. We will be back in just a couple minutes with session number 9.